Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar session. We are joined by Nikki from the Federation of Small Business, as well as Neil De Silva, who's today's nutrition expert, who's going to be taking us through our topic today, which is all about improving your productivity through good nutrition and diet. My name's Jane Syme. I'm a Senior Enterprise and Skills Executive at the Solent LEP. The Solent LEP are funding today's webinar as part of the Solent Business Wellbeing Support Programme that we are delivering with our partner Federation of Small Business. So really pleased for anyone that can join live today, but for those of you that can't, we are sharing the recording of today's session so that you can benefit from all of the valuable content that Neil will be sharing on this topic. And of course, you can share that with your team members as well after the session for anyone else that you think would get great value from it too. So if I can, I can't see my opening slide at the moment. So if you wouldn't mind sharing the first slide, Sophie, I'm just going to very quickly give an overview for those of you that aren't aware of the other support available through the Solent LEP Growth Hub, so the business support service that the Solent LEP deliver. And the wellbeing support is just one of the opportunities for you as a business owner to benefit from lots of different types of signposting and advice. So as you can see here, the main ways that we support businesses within the Growth Hub team are through signposting, through giving practical advice to business owners who come to us with challenges, and through delivering various different programs of funded support. All of these are focused on helping your business to grow. And of course, throughout the last couple of years, growth hasn't necessarily been something that businesses have been able to focus on. And perhaps they're thinking more about building resilience and just helping their business to survive and to be able to. So, slide, please. So just to these do change. So particularly coming up in March, shortly developing some new programs and opportunities for you to benefit from. But as it stands at the moment, we have a number of intensive support programs. So these at the moment focus on starting to export. They focus on building resilience into your business and recovering from the impacts of the pandemic, or perhaps the impacts that Brexit might have had on your business. And also the Digital Accelerator Programme, which focuses on digitization within your business and trying to make sure that you are optimizing your business's effectiveness and the engagement that you have with your customers through various digital means, whether that's websites, digital marketing, and all different kinds of digital intervention. So helping you to build your strategy through digital. We've got the peer networks support that has been rolling out for the last year or so across the country, and we've been running that very successfully throughout the Solent, so helping business owners to come together to support each other by sharing and collaborating, helping each other through various challenges, and those are across various different industries as well, so you don't have to be in the same industry with someone to be able to empathise with the challenges they face in their business and to be able to add value to them. That's been really well received format that we hope to continue in some way into the new financial year as well. We have our Sustainable Business Support Programme, which allows business owners to speak directly to an expert sustainability consultant who can help you formulate an action plan for your business and making sure that you're reducing your carbon emissions and moving forward in the most sustainable way you can as a business. We have been rolling out various workshops to help small businesses to win public sector contracts. That has been really, really popular. So we definitely hope to continue delivering that type of support moving forwards, and perhaps even starting to expand that into winning private sector contracts as well. And of course, you know, that today's webinar is part of the wider offering within our Solent Business Wellbeing Support Programme. So we've been allowing access through the Federation of Small Business to a dedicated service where business owners can speak to qualified nurses about any physical or mental health problems, as well as delivering a series of webinars on different focus areas from sleep to nutrition, as we are today. As I say, if you do need any practical advice from the Growth Hub Business Support Team, or any signposting to various expert provisions and organisations throughout the region or nationally, or if you'd like us to conduct a funding search for you using our search facility online, we'd be more than happy to help with that. We would just ask you to get in touch with us via our inquiries email address at the bottom of the screen there. So it's inquiries@solentlep.org.uk. You can also get through to that via the website on our Contact Us page, which is on our Business Support Hub on the Solent LEP website. So you can get through to the team who will schedule you in a one-to-one chat with an advisor, and we can talk through any challenges that you face, and we can get you to the support you need, whether that's something that we're funding and delivering ourselves or something that is delivered by another organisation, that we can help you to navigate that and to get to the place that you need quicker, so that you can get on with the business of running your company. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. I'm going to hand over to Nikki from FSB now so that she can take you through a bit more about today's focus topic and the wellbeing support. And then at the end of the session, after Neil has talked through the main content, we will be having a question and answer portion of the webinar where you can put your questions to Neil. I would ask that throughout the session you put the questions into the chat function, and then we'll put those to Neil at the end. Obviously, you can put your hand up if one occurs to you while we're doing the questions. That's absolutely fine. But any that you can put in the chat throughout the session would be appreciated too. So, without further ado, Nikki, over to you.
Thank you, Jane. Yeah, and as Jane explained, I have been working on behalf of the Federation of Small Businesses, FSB, with Solent Growth Hub to put together some support. We very quickly realised about 2 years ago now, when the pandemic started, just the physical impact that it was having on small business owners and their well-being, being under such huge stress. And that's why the wellbeing scheme was put together. So as part of the scheme, people who aren't FSB members, business owners, can access FSB Care and all of the support that is available through FSB Care. And as Jane has already said, we are doing a couple of webinars as well around specific topical areas, just to help businesses really, get hold of their health in 2022 and make the most of things now that restrictions are starting to lift and improve their productivity. So I'm really delighted on behalf of the Federation of Small Businesses to invite Neil De Silva, who's one of our FSB members, to talk about diet and nutrition and why it's really, really important for our productivity. So Neil, over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Nikki, and thank you, Jane and Sophie as well, for the opportunity to present to you guys. I really appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen with you, if I may. Okay, let's get that working. If you can quickly give me a quick thumbs up just to let me know you can see my screen. Fantastic. So healthy you, healthy business. I'll do a brief introduction on myself in a moment, but obviously many of us are business owners or in positions of seniority within our businesses, and it's really important that we look after our own health. As a nutritionist, I've seen time and time again business owners spend so much time and effort looking after their business, often to their own personal neglect in terms of their health. And of course, if they're not functioning as well as they could be personally, then how can they give their best to their business? So before we go into the content of the presentation, Just a quick disclaimer. Okay, I am not giving you advice in this presentation. I'm not making recommendations. I'm purely giving you information, hopefully to educate you a little bit, and to kind of start that spark that hopefully gets you interested more in nutrition if you're not very interested in the topic at the moment, that then leads you to do your own research. But what I would say is, as we go through, if there's any particular issues that you feel are of relevance to you, please seek professional advice. That might be with your doctor, that might be with a nutritionist like myself, it might be with me. You are more than welcome to make contact with me away from the meeting. All my contact details on my website is down bottom of each page. I do stress this is for information only. Not doing a sales pitch. I don't need to. I am just giving you some guidance. Okay, so a little bit about me. A couple of people that have really had a big influence in my life over the last 10 years. This guy here is my dad. Now, my dad died in 2012, age 66. To put this in perspective, that's one of my sons. That particular son is 23 now. So that picture was taken quite a few years ago. But my dad, who I was very close to, died in 2012, age 66. And he died of a condition related to undiagnosed type 2 diabetes. He wasn't overweight. He was about 11 stone. I thought he had a reasonably healthy diet. Obviously, I didn't know as much about nutrition then as I do now. But yeah, he had type 2 diabetes, but was completely unaware that he was a type 2 diabetic. And sadly, it took his life. But that led me on to a personal journey, because at the time, I was actually clinically obese. I had high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and I was diabetic as well. And I didn't realize it. So my journey into nutrition initially was a personal one, because I didn't want to die and I wanted to be healthy. And it's obviously led me down the route of a completely new career path. And I've been doing this now for the last 9 years. And this other guy is my younger brother. We are going to talk about mental health a bit later on in the presentation, but this is my younger brother, Rob, and he took his life in 2017. He was aged 36, very talented guy, a musician, DJ'd around the world. But that led me on to a journey in mental health. Became a mental health first aider. I joined Samaritans in 2018 as a listening volunteer. I was a director of Samaritans for a couple of years, and I'm still treasurer and trustee of the charity as well. So got a big interest in mental health, but obviously my specialism is very much in nutrition. Not going to bore you with these. That's not why you're here today. These are on my website if you're that interested in finding out more about my qualifications. But suffice to say, I take what I do pretty seriously, and I'm always looking to improve my knowledge. And my 100 million mission, of which this forms a part, is to educate 100 million people worldwide by the year 2030 to prevent, to identify, to manage or reverse type 2 diabetes. And there is going to be a slide on diabetes today, because we are on the verge of a huge issue, and hopefully you'll understand a bit more as we go through the presentation. So in today's presentation, we are going to look at type 2 diabetes for about 10 minutes or so. We are then going to look at sugar, junk food, and the endemic issue we have today of overeating. We're going to look at ways that we can eat for good health, and also look at exercise. We are going to cover mental health briefly, because I think it's important. I don't profess to be a mental health specialist in that sense, but I do understand more than the average person. So we're going to talk about mental health. And then at the end, I'm going to give you 5 really easy ways to improve your day-to-day health that you can put into place straight away, and it will probably have an impact on your health. So if you're okay with that, strap yourself in. We've got a lot of information to cover. So why am I doing this presentation? Well, as I mentioned, there is an imbalance at the moment. People are spending a lot of time, a lot of effort in their business, and quite rightly so. Many businesses have been hit really hard over the last couple of years, mine included, and the focus just gets spent so much on improving the business, sometimes just surviving. That's where our efforts go. But we often do that to either the expense of our personal health, or we just don't take care of ourselves as well as we could do. And obviously, if we improve our personal health, then our business health will improve. And also in terms of our personal life, then obviously many elements of our personal life will improve as well. And I do feel that the field of health and nutrition is confusing. There's a lot of information. There's lots of contradictions in the media. You know, one day eggs are okay, and the next day eggs aren't okay, and then one day milk is unhealthy, and the next day milk is healthy. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and cut through that and keep it really simple, okay, but really practical as well. I really believe in, when I do these education pieces, just keeping it simple enough for people to be able to pick up the major points and to be able to follow them. So I'm just going to set my timer. Okay, so let's have a look at diabetes. So part 1 is all about diabetes. This is a real big problem. Now, I don't know if many of you are on the call today are diabetic, type 2 diabetic, or you know someone that is type 2 diabetic. But hopefully by the end of this 10-minute segment, you'll understand a little bit more about what type 2 diabetes is. And as I mentioned, type 2 diabetes took my dad. It's an area that I'm very passionate about. If I hadn't taken that action, I would be a fully diagnosed type 2 diabetic now. And I like to try and educate people to avoid the path that I was going down. So type 2 diabetes, we call it T2DM, which is type 2 diabetes mellitus. That's the technical term. And actually the word diabetes comes from the Greek word to siphon or to pass through. And back in the day, before we had all the modern technology we have today, like glucometers, the way that type 2 was diagnosed was to taste or to smell the patient's urine. So the doctors would actually taste or smell the urine. And if it tasted sweet or smelt sweet, then that was a diagnosis, which is the reason why the mellitus bit comes from the Greek word from sweet. What they also realized as well, that as patients were drinking fluids, it was almost coming out the other end almost straight away, and hence the reason it's derived from the word to siphon or to pass through. So quite interesting. People don't realize that we doctors used to taste patients' urine to diagnose type 2. It's quite interesting. If someone says they're diabetic, around 90% of people are type 2. So around 8% are type 1, and the two are very different conditions. And the other 2% make up those that have the more rarer forms of diabetes, like gestational diabetes. And type 1 is an autoimmune condition. So the individual has little control over their condition. It's an autoimmune condition in as much as it destroys the beta cells of the pancreas. And obviously then the body can't produce insulin, which then leads to the condition we know as type 1. Whereas type 2, we have a lot of control over, actually, in terms of our diet and lifestyle. So if you are type 2, it can be managed and it can be reversed in some cases. The good thing is if you're not type 2, you have a big influence as to whether you develop type 2 as you get older. So in the UK, there's now around 4.9 million people living with type 2 diabetes. Put that in perspective, in 1996, there was 1.6 million. So you can see how the problem has grown over the last 25 years or so. And this is the really scary number here, is there's an additional 800,000 people who have the condition right now. So they are type 2 diabetic, but they don't know they're type 2 diabetic. It's undiagnosed because either it's not manifested itself in terms of the symptoms, or it is symptomatic, but they just haven't really joined the dots as to what the symptoms are. And I'm going to help you to understand some of those symptoms a little bit later on. And unfortunately, my dad was one of that number. So, you know, he didn't join the dots, he didn't pick it up, and it took his life. This is also a scary number as well. So of the entire UK population, around 1 in 3 people are pre-diabetic. So pre-diabetes is where you're not a fully diagnosed type 2 diabetic, but you're not in the normal range either. You're in that kind of no man's land between the two. And the really scary number here is, of those 1 in 3 people, so for argument's sake, let's say it's 17 million people, only 10% of those know that they are pre-diabetic. I'll let that land for a moment. Only 10%, only around less than 2 million people of the 17, 18 million people who have pre-diabetes right now know they have it. This is a huge problem. And it's estimated that according to Diabetes UK, that around 13.6 million people will develop type 2 over the next 10 years if they don't make changes to their diet and lifestyle. So we'll be faced with nearly 18, 19 million people by the year 2032 with type 2 diabetes. And it's a big enough problem at the moment because those 4.9 million people actually cost the NHS around £25,000 a minute, so £14 billion a year, treating type 2 and its associated complications. So we're spending £14 billion a year treating a condition that for the most part is actually avoidable, I'd say, in a lot of cases. And around the world, my market for type 2 diabetics is 450 million people. So quite a small market, I'm sure you'll agree. But my goal is to educate the majority of these people to try and deal with their condition. So when we look at the complications, and this is where we do get a bit serious, there are a lot of issues that type 2 diabetes causes in the body. So it damages the heart, it damages the blood vessels, it damages the eye. We have a condition called diabetic retinopathy. It does a lot of damage to the kidneys in advanced type 2 diabetes. So we have diabetic nephropathy. It does damage to our nerves, particularly in the limbs. It can cause issues with our hearing. It can cause lower limb damage, slow healing of wounds. It goes on and on and on. Foot amputation is quite a common issue, and in fact, it's actually the leading cause of limb amputation in this country. So nearly 10,000 people a year go into hospital to have a bit of their body taken away because of type 2 diabetes. It does increase the risk of some cancer. It can lead on to mental health issues. There's a really interesting link now between type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's disease. And they believe that it's because of the sustained high blood sugar levels and high insulin levels that it causes damage to the brain long term. And around 700 people die every week prematurely as a result of type 2 diabetes related complications. So you can see it's a big problem, and it's one that's seemingly from the last 20 or 30 years of statistics only getting worse. So because type 2 can go undiagnosed for so many years, and it can take up to 10 years before it's picked up, either because someone has chronic symptoms and they finally go to the doctor because they're concerned about their health, but they don't know they're a diabetic, or it's picked up on a random blood test. And this is the issue: is if you don't pick up these symptoms, and you don't start joining the dots and start thinking, oh, maybe the reason I'm getting up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet isn't because I'm a little bit older than I was 10 years ago. Maybe I need to go and get it checked out. You get my drift, okay? So I'm going to go through some symptoms here. I will stress that if you identify with one or more of these symptoms, it does not mean you are type 2 diabetic. However, I would suggest that if you haven't had a blood sugar check done in the last couple of years, it might be worth having a blood sugar check, because I've done this presentation, or this part of the presentation in particular, and on more than one occasion, an attendee has gone to go and get their blood sugars checked, and they have come back to me and said, "Thank you so much. I've just been diagnosed as type 2, and now I'm on medication." So I do stress, it doesn't mean that you are type 2, but you might want to get it checked out if you pick up some of these symptoms, because my dad didn't, and obviously we know what happened with him. So frequent urination, so peeing a lot, going to the toilet a lot, and also linked to that, obviously, constant thirst. In advanced type 2, you start peeing out glucose and you start peeing more frequently. And sometimes your pee can smell a bit sweet, but obviously linked with that comes chronic dehydration as well, and obviously that need to continue drinking, always feeling hungry and feeling tired, where the cells are just not getting the energy they need to function properly. Intermittent blurred vision is another one, where your vision will momentarily go and then come back, not for a long time, maybe a split second, but it will go and come back. And if it happens on a regular occasion, again, I'd get that checked out anyway, but that is a potential diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. If you're having cuts and wounds that are taking longer to heal, that can be a problem. If you get tingling, so in advanced nerve damage, you get tingling in the fingers, you get tingling in the hands and the feet. That can be problematic as well. If you get patches of dark skin and also yeast infections, Now, people get yeast infections throughout their life. If you get regular yeast infections, that can be an indication that you are peeing out glucose. And obviously the bacteria that naturally live in those areas can feed on that glucose, particularly more in women, because just the way their plumbing is obviously different to a man's. But I've had 2 cases recently of men that have had thrush on a regular basis and then started to join the dots, made contact with me, and it was like, yeah, you know, we need to deal with this. So yeast infections can also be a red flag. You know, if you're getting them once every 5 years, it really isn't an issue. But if you're getting them on a more regular basis, and again, you've not had a blood sugar check done, I'd suggest maybe getting that checked out. So how can we reduce our risk? Well, obviously cutting sugar and refined carbs out of our diet. So our diet and our lifestyle will have a big impact on our health, not just in terms of type 2 diabetes, but generally speaking, our overall well-being will be hugely influenced by our diet and lifestyle. If you're overweight, lose some weight, because that has a big impact. However, if you are of a good weight, please don't fool yourself into thinking that type 2 does not apply to you. One of my type 2 diabetic clients is 10 stone 8 and has a big issue with type 2 diabetes. I won't say any more than that, but please don't be fooled if you're a healthy weight that type 2 will never get you. Eat a high fiber diet, obviously minimize processed foods. Some of these things will come up once or twice more during the presentation. Watch portion sizes, drink lots of water. You know, if you're drinking sweet drinks, fizzy drinks, so, you know, artificially sweetened drinks, yeah, those sorts of things, and you can't go wrong with water. Get more exercise in, stop smoking, moderate alcohol. All of those will actually improve your health, even if you're not a diabetic. But if you are type 2 diabetic, or you are at risk of type 2, or you don't want to become a type 2 diabetic, putting these things into place will stand you in good stead, particularly as you get older. So part 2, let's have a look at sugar, junk food, and overeating. Hopefully you're enjoying this so far. So let's look at the sugar addiction cycle, because many people ride this little cycle and they don't even realize that they are on it. So we eat sugar, we like it, we crave it, it's addictive. On a hormonal level, sugar is incredibly addictive. Okay, so if you're trying to break a sugar habit, then kudos to you, because it's not always easy. There was a study that was done a little while ago now, actually, where they wired up the brains of sugar addicts and heroin addicts, and they looked at the way that the hypothalamus was fired up when they partook in their particular drug, and it was almost identical. So sugar can be as addictive as hard drugs, but it can be broken. The cycle can be broken. So we eat sugar, our blood sugar levels start to rise. Dopamine, the feel-good hormone, gets released. We then get a big dose of insulin being pumped into our blood to bring our sugars back down again. Our sugar levels fall. So we've gone from a sugar high to now we're having a sugar low. Then we get hungry, we get cravings for sugary things again, and then we repeat that cycle. When you look at that on paper, I'm sure some of you will recognize that cycle where we have something sweet, it gives us a bit of a sugar rush. The sugar rush inevitably doesn't last very long, and then we crave more sugary things. Once you realize you're on that cycle, you can actually find ways to try to break it. And sugar's incredibly damaging to the body. So don't get me wrong, we need a small amount of sugar in our diet every day. Our brain can only really use glucose effectively as a form of energy. The problem isn't that we've got sugar in our diet. The problem is that, number one, we've got far too much sugar in our diet. And number two, and this is quite an insidious issue, is that lots of sugar is added to our food by food companies in terms of processed and ultra processed foods. And so lots of us are eating too much sugar, not because we're putting lots of sugar in our teas and coffees, for example, but because we're eating processed foods and it's hidden away in those foods. So sugar obviously is an inherent cause of weight gain. It does increase the risk of heart disease and type 2 diabetes, which we've already covered. It does increase the risk of cancer. Sugar massively affects our mood as well. It can give us those sugar rushes where we're just full of energy and full of beans, and then we crash, and then we're a bit moody and a bit agitated. It can affect our mental health long term, so it can contribute towards depression, too much sugar in our diet. It's not good for your skin, and it does increase the rate of cellular aging. It can drain your energy. Once you've gone through that sugar high and then you get that sugar low, you can feel exhausted, and then you crave more sugar to kind of combat the effect of that drain of energy. Can lead to a condition called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, so that can have a big impact on our liver health and does increase the risk of kidney disease. So I do stress that it's not that sugar is bad per se. Small amounts of sugar actually are not terrible for you, but there is a limit, and particularly if you're partaking in too much sugar on a regular basis, then you can set yourself up for some of these issues. And some other considerations in nutritional terms, sugar is what we class as being empty calories. So it contains nothing apart from calories. Some argue that brown sugar is healthier. Yeah, okay, it's healthier. It does not mean it's healthy. It does have some tiny traces of nutrients in brown sugar, but essentially it's still empty calories. It is addictive, as we mentioned. So we as humans, we love that feel-good hormone. We love that rush of dopamine, but dopamine inevitably doesn't last very long. And then we're craving that next sugar high. So you can see how addictive it can be. And on a very, again, a very insidious level, it can actually make you eat more. If you eat lots of junk food, lots of foods that are high in sugar, particularly if it's processed food, it actually blocks this hormone called leptin. So leptin and ghrelin kind of work hand in hand. Ghrelin tells us when we're hungry, and leptin tells us when we're full up. And sugar blocks the signals to the brain that tells us when to stop eating, which is why when we get that huge pizza that's 1,200 calories, we can normally finish it off quite easily. But if you had a meal of fish and vegetables that were 1,200 calories, most people could never eat that much. So it really does become a problem that leads to overeating, and then obviously those problems associated with weight gain and obviously obesity. We have a chronic issue in this country now, where I think the last statistic was 1 in 3 people aren't just overweight, they are obese. We are kind of where America was 10, 20 years ago. Obviously, America has a bigger issue than we have, but I think it's 1 in 3 is obese, and about 60% of people are overweight. So we have a huge problem, and it's all linked to our diet. So when we look at junk food, some of you may have heard of UHP, some of you may not. UHP is very simply ultra highly processed food. Okay, so it's food that really does not bear any resemblance to food in nature. Because when we talk about junk food, people think it's about the stuff that's here on the slide. So, the onion rings, the chips, the burgers, the stuff that we associate with fast food joints is what we call junk food. But actually, ultra highly processed food is readily available in our supermarkets, and we don't realize it, and lots of us are still buying it. And it has a huge impact on our health. So these are foods that have multiple ingredients. So when you look at the ingredients list, it reads like a chapter of War and Peace. There's dozens and dozens of ingredients. The more ingredients there are in a particular food, generally speaking, the less it will look like or be like real food. So, you don't need an ingredients list on an apple or a pear or, a punnet of grapes. But you do need an ingredients list on stuff that comes in tins and cans, or you whack in the microwave for 3 minutes. And the more ingredients it's got, the more of a problem this becomes. So lethargy and tiredness, junk food is not good for our health. It's not good for our well-being because it tends to be quite fiber deficient. It can lead to gut issues and constipation, which can then lead into other stomach issues like bloating. And you'll notice as well, if you eat a lot of junk food, that acid reflux becomes a huge problem. It can have a massive effect on our mental health, on our cognitive function, and also on our memory and our concentration. It increases inflammation in the body. Inflammation is not your friend. Inflammation leads to all sorts of unpleasant things in the body long term. Obviously, weight gain is a theme throughout this presentation, but because you're eating junk food, because it tends to be calorie intense and nutrient deficient, we tend to eat more and more of it, so we eat too many calories. Because it's not nutritionally strong, or it is nutritionally deficient, that can lead to obviously health issues with our health, including obviously an impact on our immune system. It can cause a decline in mental health. And obviously my work with Samaritans, you'll understand I've got a pretty good basis and understanding of those. It can increase the pressure on our kidneys as well, which can cause long-term kidney issues. Diabetes, we've already covered. It can have an impact on our cholesterol because it's just full of salt, full of sugar, full of fat. Cancer can be an issue. If you've got a junk food diet, then you do increase your risk, of course, of developing cancer and also heart disease as well. So there are loads of reasons for improving your diet if you have either a junk food diet or a processed food or ultra highly processed food diet. Doesn't mean that you can't have the odd burger now and again. It's not about being perfect. But if you eat right and eat natural foods 80-90% of the time, generally speaking, you can't go wrong. And because lots of people do eat the junk food and the sugary foods and the foods that we consider to be low in nutrients and high in calories, it often leads to overeating. Okay, so overeating is very simply where we are using far less calories than we are consuming. So we're eating 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 calories a day, and we're burning, if we're lucky, 2,000 calories. And lots of us work in sedentary office-based jobs as well, which does tend to make the problem even worse. Another reason people overeat as well is obviously emotional eating, the psychological issues. So, people associate sitting down in front of the TV at night with a glass of wine or a bar of chocolate or a piece of cake or some biscuits, or they'll go and make a cup of tea at work and then they'll have a couple of chocolate digestives. We tend to associate things together. But boredom is actually a real big problem where people, it's a bit like smokers who give up smoking. Half of the issue is they're giving up the smoking. Half of the issue is also doing something with their hands. And boredom is a real issue when it comes to overeating. And if you actually stop and think about your habits and your behaviors, and when you eat the high calorie junk food, it was probably at times where you haven't got much going on. We mentioned obviously about it being calorie high and nutrient deficient. All this stuff here, this stuff that comes from factories and is highly or has a high sugar content, it's just not good for our health. It's not good for our physical well-being or our mental well-being. And if you do get those pains in your stomach after a meal, if you get gassy, if you feel bloated, then that can be a sign you've eaten too much. A really interesting way to indicate when you're full up, and most people don't know this, is that food, your brain kind of dumbs down your taste buds, so that when you're actually full up, the sign that you're full up shouldn't be that sign where you feel like you can't eat another morsel. It's actually when food starts to taste a bit more bland, that's the time where your brain is saying, okay, enough's enough. If you eat until you are full up, as in, oh, I couldn't eat another spoonful, then you have probably eaten too much. And binge eating disorder is a big problem. It is a big, big problem. We have a combined problem of people eating lots of junk food and eating too much of it because of the nature of the junk food. And we just go round and round in circles. And somewhere along the line, we need to break that cycle. So I've covered some of these already, but these are some of the issues. If you are overeating, if you are eating that junk food, it's going to have a huge impact on your health and long-term health as well. And, when we look at things like high cholesterol, high blood pressure and heart disease, you will be put on medication for some of those conditions at some point, I've no doubt, if you've got them. And then that in turn can lead to other issues. So the key is not waiting until these things happen to then be given drugs by the pharmaceutical industry to deal with the problem that's been caused, is to intervene beforehand and actually try to live your best life and your healthiest life now, so that these things don't become a problem as you get older. So again, we've mentioned cancer, mental health issues, digestive issues, and obviously very sadly premature death. And those people that don't die prematurely but have these sorts of diets and lifestyles, it's just the pills that are keeping them alive. And I'm really about improving quality of life and not just longevity. Who wants to live an unhealthy, long, unhappy life? I'd rather people be healthy throughout their life and enjoy their retirement and their older age. So what changes can we make? In terms of overeating, eating more slowly is a real big tip. You know, if you chew your food properly, if you're a quick eater, it's a problem. But if you chew your food properly and you take time to enjoy the flavors and enjoy the food, you will send signals to your brain that you are eating. If you eat quickly, you will generally eat too much. If you're eating with large plates or you're drinking drinks with large glasses, then a real simple tip is to trick the brain into eating less by using smaller plates. Smaller plates work. If you're having full-size dinner plates and you want to eat less, don't put smaller portions on the same size plate, because the brain doesn't like that. If you actually go down to a slightly smaller plate with a smaller portion size, you'll trick your brain into thinking you're having a full meal. Eat whole foods. You can't go wrong with whole foods, low calorie, nutrient dense foods, high fiber foods. Consuming natural foods is obviously really important. And again, a number of themes that go through this presentation. And also drinking water as well. You know, if you don't drink much water, then that can be a problem, because actually water can help to combat those sensations of hunger. As we've already mentioned, highly processed foods are an issue. So, you know, stay away from those highly processed, ultra processed foods. Try and stick to natural foods. You can use an online diary to monitor what you eat as well, and avoid liquid calories. Okay, liquid calories are a big issue. The body does not deal well with liquid calories. So try and eat your calories, don't drink your calories. And when it comes to habit changing, you know where your trigger foods are, know situations. You know, don't eat out of boredom. Try and eat in the moment. Try not to eat out of habit or eat while you're doing other things. Try and be in the moment and eat mindfully. Try and eat natural foods. As I say, don't eat from containers. Measure out smaller portions. And do focus on eating nutritious foods. Okay, it's not just about the calories in foods, it's about the nutrients that we get from them as well. Stress management is important. We'll cover a little bit later on in the presentation. And things like nuts and seeds are really good to snack on. Okay, nuts, seeds and fruit. If you think about the foods we were eating 10,000 years ago, we were eating the fish that we caught, the animals we hunted, the nuts, the seeds, the berries that we foraged, the vegetables that we grew, the fruit that we picked from the tree. We have come away from eating a natural diet. Doesn't mean you've got to eat a caveman diet by any means, and I don't advocate any particular diets with a capital D, because inherently diets with a capital D are not sustainable. But have balance and eat proper food, and try and eat the foods that we were eating sort of 10,000 years ago. And obviously drink more water. Drinking water is really important. If you're drinking diet drinks or sugary drinks, try and cut them out. Eat fruit, never drink it. Okay, fruit juice, we get told it's one of our 5 a day. You'll never see me drinking fruit juice. If you're going to partake in fruit, which I do advocate, particularly with the peel, then eat fruit, don't drink it. And obviously get professional help if you need it. So what is eating healthily? So as a nutritionist, I try to give people a real broad spectrum of how to eat healthily. I'm not prescriptive. If someone comes to me wanting food plans, that sort of thing, I don't do food plans. I give people a framework to work within, because I need people to think for themselves. But the crux of healthy eating is about eating in balance. And balance is really important. So when we cut out major food groups, as some diets with a capital D do, then we start to cause health problems long term. I'm not going to mention any in particular, but when you cut out carbohydrates, for example, that can cause issues. If you cut out fats or proteins, that can cause issues. So it's all about balancing what we eat, but trying to keep it as natural as possible. And obviously a wide variety, you know, fruits and vegetables are different colours for different reasons. We talk about the colours on our plate, and they have different degrees of nutrients in them, you know. So try and have a mixture, a variety of foods, but try to keep them as natural as possible. Obviously cutting down on processed foods, so look at the ingredients list. If there's lots of added sugar, salt or fat in them, then, you know, try to keep away from those. And the more ingredients that there are in those particular foods, potentially the more unhealthy and nutrient deficient they're going to be. And try and keep a healthy weight, okay? Now, as I mentioned earlier, I have a diabetic client who's under 11 stone. So being a healthy weight does not make you superhuman, and it doesn't mean that you can't get ill or develop illnesses. However, it's been proven that if you are carrying too much weight and you are carrying it long term, that can be an issue, and that can lead to a lot of health issues. Diabetes we've already covered earlier on, but things like heart disease and cancer is, the risk is higher if you are carrying too much weight. And why should we eat healthy? Well, it's better for our heart. Good heart health. We're all told about good heart health. It does reduce the risk of cancer. If we eat healthily, we do have a lower risk of weight gain. And the reason why is when we're eating natural foods and healthy foods and fruits and vegetables and fish and lean white meats, then we're going to eat less of it because it's more nutrient dense than it is calorie dense. It can affect our mental health and our mood. So our mood can be improved. We will have more energy. In our business, we have more a better cognitive function and obviously improved mental health, which then leads on to things like improved memory. Our gut health will be healthier, and our gut health is intrinsically linked to our immune function. So if we've got a better diet and a better gut health and a healthier microbiome, then our immune system is probably going to be better as well. Less risk of serious illness, and obviously we will sleep better as well. And as you probably guessed by now, these are just some tips that I'll give you, but this isn't rocket science. Eating healthy is not difficult. Just that most people don't do it because they don't think about it, because we live in a fast food, junk food, whack it in the microwave 3 minutes type of society, because we're all in a rush to get stuff done. But yeah, whole foods, eat fruit, don't drink it, stay hydrated. Fish is good. If you're not a fish eater, I would encourage you to eat fish. Red meat has issues linked to colorectal cancer long term. So I'd always encourage people to reduce the amount of red meat they eat and switch to more white meat if they like white meat. Processed meats are an absolute no-no. So things like salamis and what have you. So basically meat that does not resemble meat is really what processed meats are. And they put all sorts of nasty things in them. And they are linked to colorectal cancer without doubt. So if you like your salamis and all those sorts of processed meats, I would encourage you to reduce them down. Obviously, eating lots of fruit and veg, we get a lot of nutrients from our fruit and veg. And if we're putting sugar in our drinks, it's bad enough the sugar that's naturally occurring in the foods and drinks that we buy. But if you're putting putting sugar in your teas and coffees, then try to avoid them. Exercise, okay, I'm not a PT, okay, I don't pretend to be a PT, I'm a nutritionist, but obviously I do get involved in physical fitness as well. So I'm going to give you some overview of some tips that can help you to increase your exercise levels really easily. But before we do that, why should we exercise? It's good for our brain health, that's been proven. Also good for our cognitive function. It can help us to combat health conditions, and diseases, so reducing down the risk of things like type 2 diabetes. It can be good to help us manage our weight. It can help us to improve our sleep quality. It's good for our mental health. It can help us to relax as well, which is obviously really important, particularly those of us that do stressful jobs. It can help reduce pain, which seems a bit counterintuitive, but actually long term, it's moderate amounts of exercise can be good at reducing things like joint pain. Good for our muscles and bones, particularly as we get older. We tend to lose a bit of muscle mass as we get older. So exercise as we age is really, really important. It obviously can be good from a mental health point of view in terms of our social life, things like park runs, for example. It does boost energy and it does improve our mood. So if you're one of those people out there that don't really enjoy exercising very much and don't know really where to start, I'm going to cover some really easy tips in a moment. But before we look at how we do it, the reasons why we should exercise, even if it's only a half an hour walk every day, are obviously proven. And if you are struggling with any of those conditions there or any of those health issues, you might want to consider taking guidance maybe, but certainly increasing your exercise levels and activity levels. Some easy exercise tips, just walking. Walking's great. If you're going to an office, take the stairs. Use a step counter to monitor how many steps you do. There's an arbitrary 10,000 steps a day, which has been around for a long, long time. It doesn't actually mean anything, if I'm honest with you, but it is a good goal for people to aim for, because if you're aiming for a goal, it's better than doing nothing at all. Planking's good for our core, really good exercise for our core muscles, but obviously be careful if you've got any back issues. If you're watching telly, then exercise while you're watching telly, kill two birds with one stone. And the secret to good exercise is just planning ahead. You know, if you're going to go out 2 or 3 days a week, put the time in your diary and stick to it. Because guess what? If you don't plan ahead, you probably won't have the time to do it. Cut down on the screen time. You know, if you're on your tablet or your computer for hours and hours every day, take some time out to just go out for a walk. And simple things like standing up more, walking around the office, doing some squats, doing some press ups, doing some crunches. You know, even a half a dozen is better than doing nothing. And reward yourself. Set yourself a goal. You know, if you want that new pair of shoes, for example, or that new outfit, set yourself a goal that says, right, I'm going to go out, I'm going to walk for half an hour, 4 times a week, over a month. And if I do that, if I achieve that, then I will buy those new pairs, that new pair of shoes or that new outfit. HIIT's good, not for everyone. Okay. And again, do it under guidance. But high intensity interval training, really good for cardio, and has been proven to have a lot of health benefits. And try and do it with a buddy. You know, exercising with a friend is so much more easier. Even if you've got to go out jogging or walking, doing it with a friend just makes the time go so much quicker. Going to cover mental health now, just for a few moments, because this one's important. Obviously, as I said, I'm not a mental health specialist. I do understand mental health more than the average person, but I don't pretend to be an expert. But obviously, our mental health is critical to our overall well-being. And in my opinion, having a fit body is of limited benefit if our mind is not in the best possible state. So this is really, you'll excuse me for a moment, because obviously this touches on a very sensitive subject for me in relation to losing my brother. But this is a really important part where we can look out for ourselves, as in whether our mental health is quite as good as it could be, or those around us. Okay, so this isn't just about you in the room today watching this presentation. This is about you helping other people potentially as well. So these are some of the signs that things are not quite right. Okay, now if I just spotted some of these signs in my brother, things might have turned out differently. But eating or sleeping too much or too little is a sign that something's not quite right. People that withdraw from usual activities, that can be a problem as well. Lack of energy, feeling numb, a lack of interest in life, aches and pains for no particular reason, that feeling of helplessness or hopelessness, maybe smoking or drinking more if they're smokers or drinkers, or using drugs, feeling confused, forgetful, on edge, upset, worried, scared for no apparent reason. You know, those sudden outbursts with friends and family can be a problem, those mood swings, having persistent unpleasant thoughts. So obviously, coming on to the subject of suicide, you know, those thoughts of suicide, those feelings of self-harm, those actions sometimes in those areas as well can obviously be huge red flags and signs that something is not quite right. But even just the inability to perform basic tasks can be a sign that something is not quite right. You know, if you've got a meeting and for some reason they just don't turn up, that's, you know, if that's unusual, if they're not, you know, if you're not used to that, then that can be a sign that things aren't quite right in the other person. So always ask the question, because mental health is really, really important, not just in our business. It does help our productivity if we're in a good place mentally, but also in our relationships. Our day-to-day management of stress is really important when it comes to our mental health. And in terms of taking action, obviously there are organisations like Samaritans that you can call on, but talking is really important. Okay, talking about how you feel with people that you trust is critical, and being able to call on people either within friends or family that you can talk with confidentially, or calling Samaritans if you need to, you know, that can be a lifeline as well. But all those areas on there, our diet, taking time out for ourselves, hobbies, moderating things like alcohol, all those on there are really important to help us maintain a good mental health. And finally, I'm going on to 5 really easy ways that we can improve our lives right here, right now. Okay, if you put any of these into action, you will probably notice an improvement in your health fairly quickly. If you can put more of them into action, even better. So number 1 is cut down on those sugary foods and drinks. There are 63 different names for sugar. Sugar that comes in fruit is fine in moderation. So I'm not dissuading you to eat fruit, because actually fruit is good for you. But lots of foods and drinks have had sugar added to them by food companies. It's estimated around 80% of supermarket food has had sugar added to it somewhere. So let's start to learn to read food labels, start to understand what you're eating and drinking, and try not to add more than 35 grams of sugar to your day. So added sugars aren't intrinsic sugars which occur naturally, like in fruit, for example, but they are sugars where they've been added by the food company as part of the process. So 35 grams of sugar per day is the government recommended amount. To put that in perspective, a can of Coke has got about 35 grams of sugar in. So you can see how easy it is to go over that limit. And if you're going for artificially sweetened foods, don't think they're any healthier. They have been linked to obesity, and they've been linked to type 2 diabetes as well. And as we covered sugar earlier, it's damaging to virtually every system of the body. Water should be your go-to drink for hydration. For most people without an underlying health issue or kidney issue, 2 to 3 litres a day, which includes green teas, fruit teas, herbal teas, generally speaking, is a good target to aim for. Obviously, if you do lots of exercise, you might want to increase it. If you're in a hot environment, you might want to increase it. But again, take guidance and advice on that. If you are drinking fizzy drinks and sweetened drinks, then switch it with water. Your body will thank you for it. And drink half a litre of water first thing in the morning. You can't go wrong with that. Half a litre when you wake up first thing in the morning, take it to bed with you at night. Rehydrate yourselves first thing in the morning, and you'll see what a difference that makes to your health. And carry water with you. You can't go wrong. If you've got water with you, you're going to drink it. If you haven't got it with you, you'll make lots of excuses as to why you can't drink it. Try to eat more fibre in your diet. You'll get fibre from natural foods, so fruits and vegetables. Most people I meet for the first time are hugely deficient in fibre because they eat lots of processed foods. You can supplement with things like psyllium husks and chia seeds and flax seeds, but I encourage you to try and get it through your diet if you can do, in terms of the food you eat. And if you've got a low fibre diet, then try to gradually build it up. Don't go bonkers, because it can cause constipation. So try and build it up a little bit by bit. Cutting out processed foods, well, that's an obvious one. We've covered processed foods and ultra-processed foods already. The body does struggle with these sorts of foods. They are calorie high and nutrient low. And actually our health is not dependent necessarily on calories per se. It's about the nutrients that we can get from those calories. So look out for those ultra-processed foods. Look out for the food labels that have multiple ingredients in and are high in sugar, salt and fat, and eat natural whole foods instead. Remember my 10,000 year rule: eat what we ate 10,000 years ago, and you can't go wrong. And exercise, we covered exercise in a previous section, but do exercise more if you are very sedentary. Try and do that 30 minutes a day if you can. Try and find an exercise that you enjoy doing. If you don't enjoy doing it and you do it because all your friends are doing it, you probably won't commit to it. But find an exercise that you really enjoy doing, and you're more likely to stick to it. And it might just be jogging, it might be swimming or cycling, it might just be walking. Whatever you do, try and find something that you enjoy and that you can commit to. And that, in conjunction with the other 4 areas, will obviously help to improve your health. And I will just very quickly mention a quick offer I launched last week, which is the Empower Hour, 60-minute session with me on Zoom, where you can tap into my years of experience and knowledge. I'll give you a full 7 days worth of food diary analysis, so you can look at what you're doing right, and what you can improve to improve your health or lose weight or whatever it might be. I'll give you a post-session report and recipes as well. And it might just be the best £79 you've ever spent. After the launch offer's expired, which will be the end of March, then it will go back to £99. But at the minute, it's £79. If you're interested, go to the diabesity.expert website and you can book your session with me. Thank you for your attention. Hope you found the information useful. And without action, it's just knowledge. And I'd argue that knowledge without action is pointless. So take some action. Hopefully you've learned a lot from today's presentation where you can apply it in your own life, and you can see some improvements in your physical and your mental health, and also in turn by the process of osmosis, an improvement in your business as well. And that is me.
Thank you so much, Neil. There's so much good value in there. So yeah, thank you. That was absolutely fantastic, and thank you for sharing your expertise with us.
My speaker time's out after 20 minutes. Right, we're back on now. Right, how's that?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us today. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the session today, we will be sharing the recording. So if you want to share that with any of your team members that you feel would also get value from that, then obviously please do. And with some links to some useful information linked to this topic as well, the main window of the event, so you can have a little look in the resources section. We did say at the start that if you had any questions, to pop them in the chat function throughout the session. I don't see any chat, any questions in the chat. Maybe just be that Neil has given us a really thorough overview, which is great. So yeah, thank you for that. Did anyone have any questions that they want to ask now before I close the session?
Yeah, I've got a...
Thanks, Nikki.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions actually. So first of all, that was a brilliant presentation, Neil. Thank you very much for that. Loads and loads of information there, and brilliant content. So what is the impact of skipping meals, you know, in those busy days when you don't have time for breakfast? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Intermittent fasting, I'm a huge fan of. Huge fan. There are so many reasons to fast, either by design, i.e., you know, you fast for 1 day a week, or if you skip a meal, unless you've got an underlying health issue. I would say if you're a type 1 diabetic, it can become problematic. But and again, if you are going to do intermittent fasting or skip meals on a regular basis, do it under some sort of guidance so you can be monitored. But I haven't had breakfast, certainly not on a regular basis, for probably 10 years now, I guess. I eat when I'm hungry. I fast for 1 day a week, so I do a 24-hour fast 1 day a week, so I don't eat for 24 hours. And what that's taught me over the last sort of 6 or 7 years of fasting is it puts you in touch with genuine hunger. So I tend to eat when I recognize I'm hungry, as opposed to eating 3 meals a day, whether I need to eat or not. So to answer your question, in my personal opinion, skipping meals is not an issue unless you've got an underlying health issue, in which case obviously take some guidance. But for the average person without any health issues, if you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry, why would you eat? I liken it to a car. You know, when your car's got half a tank of fuel in it, you don't go and tank it up. You tank up your car when the fuel gets low. And same with your body. You know, if you fast for 1 day a week, or you get used to skipping meals, you start to become in touch with genuine hunger. And then naturally you eat less anyway, because you eat when you're hungry, as opposed to eating just out of habit.
Oh, thank you, Neil. It's so difficult, isn't it, to cut between what's myth and what's actual, you know.
Fasting's great. And there's so much, there are so many reasons to fast.
Okay, thank you for that. And my next question was, I've heard that it is good to walk after eating. Is that true, or is that another myth?
Oh yeah, I mean, walking's good anyway. It can help the digestive process, particularly if you've had a big meal. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't do more than a walk. I've known people that go out running after meals, and that's probably not to be recommended. But walking, yeah, and the good thing is we associate habits and behaviours together. So it's a thing called habit stacking. So if you associate walking with eating, and you do that over a sustained period of time, every time you eat, you want to go for a walk. You know, it's habit stacking, and we won't go into it now, but please look it up. But if you start to associate, I've had a meal, therefore I need to go for a walk, you'll naturally start to get more exercise in anyway. And yeah, it's actually good for you.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, we'll just say thank you so much, Neil. And of
My
course,
pleasure.
we are sharing we're sharing a link to your website. We're sharing a link to other really useful resources as well on the Federation of Small Business website and the Solent LEP wellbeing support page as well. So please do have a little look at those resources and see what you think might be of value to you. And please do keep an eye on the Solent LEP calendar for further events that are going to hopefully help you to grow your business and to make sure that you can be as resilient as possible as a business person, and both professionally and personally. So thank you so much again. Thank you, Nikki, as ever, and the Federation of Small Business for partnering with us on this programme. And thank you everyone for joining live, and for those who have watched the recording after the live session. And we'll leave it there.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.